Hello everybody, JGC Anime here, and today we're here to review Clash with the Elite Season 2, so without further ado, let's just hop right into it. So, what is the story of Clash with the Elite Season 2? Basically, having just finished the island exam, our team is all up on a ship where they're now trying to spend some of their vacation time before going back to school, only for the school to reveal, surprise, there's another exam that we didn't tell you about, and now you're going to have to go through that exam. So, with that in mind, they're now trying to figure out some new stuff that's going down, a lot of new exams popping up here and there, and all the while, Ayana Koji, our main man, is trying to go through the motions of everything, and yeah, that wasn't a great description, but we're just gonna roll with it. So, in terms of spoiler-free thoughts, I'm just gonna say this. As I've said before in my previous review, I have read the light novels for this series, and this is actually the first time I watched Season 2 after having read the light novels. And as an adaptation of volumes 4 to 7.5, it wasn't that great. It wasn't terrible, but it left a lot of things to be desired. It didn't really feel that great to me. There were a few standout episodes, but more often than not, I just didn't really care about what was going on. A lot of the things that were happening, a lot of the changes they made, I just didn't agree with a lot of them. In fact, episode 5, which was actually part of the plot this time, unlike episode 7 of season 1, had the same amount of rage from me. Like, I watched episode 5 and I just despised it. Like, I was so mad while watching it. It just gave me the same feeling I got while watching episode 7 of season 1, but the biggest difference is that that was a filler episode. This was an actual episode part of the plot, but for some reason the episode just got me so mad because, well, I don't know the reason why, because it was super rushed. But the simple fact of the matter is, this season tries to cram way too much stuff inside of a 13 episode season, which I noticed that this series is kind of having a problem with, since apparently the upcoming season 3, which I believe at the time of this coming out is already airing, and I'm probably watching it. It's just, the biggest problem that this anime suffers from is the fact that it tries to push through too much at once. Like, apparently it's going to be adapting volumes 8 to 11.5. Do you know how many volumes that is? That is too much. That is too much to adapt to less than like 13 episodes. And season 2 just proves it. Like, season 2 more often than not struggles with how it's trying to pace things, and it ruins a lot of really good storylines because it's just trying to switch and move things around. It makes half the stuff that happens not make any sense at all. Like, they'll cut stuff down and they'll just move things around and then make characters say things that have no relevance at this point in the plot. And it's just, I just didn't like this season that much. It wasn't bad, it's just, there's not that many episodes I can say I liked. Like, out of the entire run of the 13 episodes, the only episodes I could say I actually really enjoyed were probably episodes 6 to 10. Like 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, while none of them were super perfect, I was able to kind of get into them. I enjoyed it. I think the way they adapted that was actually really good. But with the exception of that, the rest of the storylines they cover in this season are more often than not that good. Some of them are all right, and the key moments are always actually really good. But with the exception of those moments, the rest of the season just doesn't really do it for me. There's so many things that are cut out, so many things that are replaced, so many things that are changed that really grind my gears. And it's not really helped by the fact that a lot of the time, because of the weird animation style they go with, you can sometimes tell that the character designs are a bit off. Like, I don't know if this is just me, but I noticed more often than not, the art style with Ayana Koji especially would constantly shift and change, where his face would make weird movements, and I don't know if, I don't know if this was just me, but more often than not, he looked constantly changed. Like, his face was morphing every scene. But yeah, I didn't like this season that much. There were some parts of it that were actually very well handled, but more often than not, I didn't enjoy it that much. There were some good moments though. In fact, I think the way they handled Horikita as well as characters like Kaoriyazawa in this season were actually a lot better than they were handled in season 1. However, I'd be lying if I said I liked it more than season 1. In fact, I'd say this is probably worse than season 1. Season 1 at least had some charm to it, where the tests were actually enjoyable enough and everything about it was still fun. But with season 2, I wasn't even really into the tests. In fact, more often than not, I didn't really care too much. I was just like, okay, yeah, this test is happening. Oh, they're taking care of that now. Okay. It's just, the best way to describe this season, as I said before, is just that it leaves much to be desired. It struggles in being something new and unique, and I just get so mad at it more often than not. And a lot of the changes they make really do ruin it, which I'll talk about most of those changes in the spoiler section, but it's just that this season was not amazing to me. It wasn't the worst thing ever. Like, it wasn't terrible, like the beyond, oh my goodness, this is so bad levels of terrible, but it was a real rough thing to sit through. Like, I was constantly thinking, all right, are we almost done with the season yet? No, we still got 6 episodes. Gosh dang it. Like, there's so many moments where I was watching and I just didn't care. I wanted the episodes to be over. I just wanted things to end. It was so dull. It took away a lot of the charm of what made the light novel so good. Like, I remember checking out a lot of these scenes in the light novel, and when I was reading them there, I loved it. I was really enjoying myself. But then you have moments in the anime where I thought, oh yeah, I'll love this scene. I'll really enjoy it. But then I just get bored halfway through, and it baffles me how they managed to handle things in a way that I'm not trying to hate on the anime. Mind you, I'm not trying to hate on it. I legitimately wanted to give this anime a chance. I wanted to give it a chance to think that, oh, maybe they adapted it really well with season 2, but I can't say it's that good. I legitimately can't. Sorry, I'm repeating myself a lot here, and it just makes me so disappointed that a series I enjoy so much is being handled so awkwardly with its anime adaptation, because there are some moments they do absolutely right. I can talk about them in the spoiler section, but there are some moments that they do really freaking good. But more often than not, I don't like it, and I just can't really talk about it without going into spoilers, so that's all I really have to say about spoiler-free thoughts, so I'm just gonna hop to the spoiler section now. Here's the timestamp to when the spoilers end. If you have seen the show, I'd recommend sticking around hearing my thoughts. If you haven't, just skip to the end so you don't get any spoilers, but again, if you have seen it, I'd recommend sticking around hearing my thoughts. So yeah, I'm gonna count up for 5, and I'm going to enter the spoiler section. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so some things that I kind of want to talk about that I think they actually handled quite well. One would be the confrontation between Horikita and Sudo, where she has to convince him to come back to everyone during the sports festival, which we'll talk about the sports festival in a little bit, since I have plenty of things to say about that. But I actually thought that moment, while not perfect, was actually handled quite well. That was just one of the more minor moments in this story. Overall, there are plenty of good moments in here that I think were actually handled quite well, but that was one of the few memorable moments where I thought, dang, I thought they were going to screw this up, but they actually did do that bad of a job. But I don't know if I'm just alone on that, but I felt like the way they handled that scene was actually quite nice. They did a fairly good job with it. And I could say the same for a few other scenes, such as the running scene between Ayano Koji and Horikita Manabu, where I thought maybe they'd mess that scene up too, like they've been doing the rest of the arc. Well, I say arc, but it's just the volume. But surprisingly enough, that scene was actually handled quite well. In fact, episode 6, which wrapped up the whole sports festival, was actually handled really well. And it honestly surprised me after the mess that was episode 5. And that was an overall solid episode. In fact, well, episode 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, which contained the entirety of the whole Horikita versus Kushida storyline, as well as the start of the Ryuen trying to find the mastermind of Class D. I don't know why I went to an accent there for a second, but all of that was actually really solid. I thought it was handled quite well. Overall, it was very nice, and I liked it a lot. But with the exception of those, a lot of the moments of this season just weren't it. As I mentioned before, the art style could sometimes be inconsistent. Sometimes the animation looked really crappy. That's not too relevant to a lot of things, but I definitely felt that there really could have been better moments with the animation. But leaving that be for now, something that was kind of more of a minor nitpick for me is actually the way they handled Ichinose in this season. While she doesn't have too many moments to shine the season overall, inside volume 4 of the light novels, she makes it clear to Ayano Koji that she was able to sniff out his plan, and she was about to tease him about it, being like, what if I go tell the school that Karuyazawa is the VIP of this exam? And it was a really awesome moment to show that Ichinose was able to figure out Ayano Koji's plan. But in the anime, they're just like, oh yeah, no, she had the same plan as him, but yeah, she didn't sniff out their plan. She just kind of overheard them about it. And that was a kind of disappointing change for me personally, as I really liked how it showed how incredibly intelligent Ichinose was as a character, and how it kind of affects how she acts later on in the story, which season 3, I believe, will be adapting some of that, which I really hope they don't screw it up, because there are several moments that season 3 will probably be adapting that I really hope they don't screw up. But yeah, Ichinose's whole thing, I really wasn't a big fan of how they changed that little moment, but it's whatever. There are a few other scenes that are changed during that whole segment on the boat with that exam as well that weren't personally my favorite thing, but overall it wasn't a bad exam handling. It was just kind of fine. Then we have to talk about the sports festival. Since I mentioned that episode 6 actually ended the sports festival on a fairly solid note, episode 5 really made me lose my hopes for this season for a little bit. Like, episode 5 is one of the worst episodes I have ever seen of Classroom of the Elite for this season, because I hated how they sped through so much. Like, in volume 5, the sports festival was a big part of that volume. We got to see how all these things played out, all the different tricks Ryuen was using to, win all the competitions with Class C. There were all these really intelligent moves that they were making that were actually really smart. But then in the anime, they're just like, oh yeah, Class C won, I guess. No, not telling the story. We're not explaining how they won. we're not trying to really go into details about that. They're just like, oh yeah, Class C won. Why did you show the actual events? Why did you skip past them? There were tons of moments to show off how intelligent Ryuen and his plans are. Why did you just cut them out? I had such a gripe with that. I get they were trying to speed things along so they could get to Volume 7, which is the big moment in this season. But I just really didn't like how they treated the sports festival, like it was just an afterthought. They just didn't really put too much heart into it until near the end in episode 6, where they actually wrapped it up on a pretty solid note overall. But that was it. That was all there was to it. And just Volume 5's adaptation of this anime was an absolute mess for me. Minus episode 6, which handled things well. The rest of the whole storyline just wasn't it. It wasn't very good. It didn't handle things too amazingly. It was just not very good. But yeah, leaving that be for now. The one kind of good, solid storyline I can really give to this season is the storyline of Horikita versus Kushida, where she makes a bet with her, and Kushida's trying to work in the background with Ryuen to try to get Horikita expelled. And it really shows some growth on Horikita's part as she pulls an intelligent move against Kushida, which I really liked. And I thought the way they handled it, especially with describing Kushida's backstory, was actually really good. I thought so many elements of that were handled so well. And that was by far the best storyline of this season, as overall, I think they did a fantastic job with it. I think they did a really good job. But that is all I can really praise in terms of an actual storyline in the season, since the rest weren't incredible. But maybe that's just my feelings kind of on some of the arcs. It's after the Kushida storyline, which was actually really good overall. We then move on to the rooftop scene, or in this case, the inside of a construction site, where Ryuen calls out Karuizawa to try and talk with her and, you know, draw out Ayano Koji. And it was fine overall. In fact, I think the actual fight between Ryuen and Ayano Koji was actually handled quite well. Like, I was surprised at how well that part was handled. And I'm really glad that they didn't fully cut out the fact that Karuizawa was not revealing the truth about Ayano Koji, and that they were kind of showing off some of her thought process, but I do wish they went into a bit more detail on it, since in the light novel, we literally have a whole first-person perspective of her explaining her thought process. So I'm glad they kept some of that in, but not all of it. But it was still nice that they kept some of it in. And I wouldn't have minded as much if they had kept in the rooftop part. It's just, I don't get why they really, I mean, I get why they probably changed it to being inside of a construction site, but at the same time, it's a bit disappointing. Like, I imagine there's two different reasons as to why they chose to change the location of the Ryuen versus Ayano Koji fight. My first guess is either it's easier to animate in the dark, or my second guess is just that they thought that this would create a more dark atmosphere than on a rooftop. But I really would have preferred if it was on the rooftop, since the rooftop definitely added some drama to it. And personally, I felt that it made more sense with everything, but maybe that's just me. I was a bit disappointed that it was just in a dark room where, had I not turned the lights off while I was watching, I probably wouldn't have been able to tell what's going on. Like, if I was watching in a bright room, I probably would have no idea what was happening. I'd barely be able to see the screen. And that's just a minor complaint I had. And yeah, just that whole storyline wasn't, I'll be honest, even the light novel, I didn't love that storyline, because I thought the whole confrontation was cool, but everything building up to it kind of was a mixed bag, where I thought some parts were really good, but other parts were just kind of eh. So while Volume 7 wasn't a personal favorite of mine, I still think the way they handled it wasn't the worst. But leaving all of those storylines be for now, another thing I would like to talk about is how many changes they really made with some of the character motivations in this season that I was a bit conflicted on. Such as the whole thing with Horikita Manabu, where in the original story, there's this whole battle between him and his enemy, Nagamo, who have this whole confrontation against one another, where Manabu really doesn't agree with the whole thing with Nagamo's plans, and he was trying to get Ayano Koji in on those plans, and the whole thing against Manabu and Nagamo plays a big role into Manabu's whole role in Volume 7, because he's trying to convince Ayano Koji to help him with this. And because of that, unlike in the anime where he says, alright, I'm here to help Ayano Koji because if I help him here, he'll help get Horikita into the role of being in the student council, which, if you've read the light novel, you know that's not why he was there. He was there because Ayano Koji promised to help him to fight against Nagamo if he helped him in this instance. And that was a weird change to me, and I think it's just because of the fact that they didn't really establish Nagamo and Manabu's rivalship, I guess. Not really rivalship, because, well, Nagamo's the only one who really sees them as rivals. Nothing really with Manabu. He just sees Nagamo as a person that he doesn't like very much. But I just felt that they really should have kept that stuff in, since it really kind of makes you think, oh man, Manabu wants his sister into the student council. That's awesome, man. He really cares about her. But if you've read the light novels, you know that's not the case. Somebody else came up with the idea to get her into the student council. That wasn't Manabu. And I just felt like that was a weird, bizarre change, and it kind of makes you misunderstand Manabu's whole character overall. Since, while there are some moments in the light novels where he clearly cares about his sister, the sense of how he joined the student council wasn't something on his mind, and I just really didn't like that change that much. And that's not the only change they really made with everything. Like, as I mentioned, Nagumo and Manabu's whole enemy situation isn't really brought up, which makes me wonder how they're going to handle season 3's first storyline, since that first storyline literally focuses on them hating each other and not liking their ideals. Quick message from future JGC anime. As of right now, inside of season 3, they have actually fully clarified the whole Nagumo and Manabu rivalry, so it's now kind of been established and things are kind of being set in place, which I don't know how to feel about them right now, but at least they're there, so I'll take what I can get. But let's move on to the rest of the video. Overall, I just don't really like how that whole part was handled. And speaking actually of Nagumo, can I just say this? I really don't like his anime design. Like, in the original light novel, he had this whole, like, dead eye, kind of baggy eyes setup where when you look at him, you could tell he's been through a lot of things. He's going through a lot. He's just trying to do things. Like, you could tell that he has, like, this eeriness to him that makes you kind of curious about his character, which, as someone who has read up to the end of volume 4.5 of year 2, I'm someone who could say that Nagumo is by far one of the most hateable characters in this series. Like, what he does in volume 4.5, I'm not going to spoil it, but what he does in that makes me hate him the most out of every character, because he just does something to one of my favorite characters, and it made me despise him, and his design really helped with that. But in the anime, he just looks like some dude. Like, he legitimately just looks like some random dude on the street, and his design does not inspire threats like the light novel art does, but maybe that's just me. But yeah, going back to what I was saying before about some changes, another change I wasn't too big a fan of was how they handled the whole Sato having a crush on Ayano Koji thing. Like, in the 13th episode of this season, they tried to cram as much as they could of volume 7.5 in there, and the way they handled it, I wasn't a super big fan of. I didn't think some of the story was bad, but there were some changes in there I kind of questioned, such as the whole thing with Ryuen, after being beat up by Ayano Koji, tries to drop out of school. Since we had this really awesome fight between him and Ayano Koji, which, while I didn't like the setting of where they were in that construction site, I didn't really like the setup. I thought the actual fight itself was awesome. But Ryuen right now is trying to drop out of school, where in the original light novel, he's trying to drop out of school because he felt, since he lost Ayano Koji, there's no point in him being there anymore. However, after two other of his companions, Albert as well as Ishizaki, complain saying they'll drop out if he drops out, where he doesn't want them to drop out, he ends up staying because of them. And that's a really nice moment to show that while the people of Class C don't like him, there's some of them that understand that he needs to be there and they have to follow him on this. That's a really good moment. But in the anime, it's just like, oh yeah, the school decided I shouldn't be suspended. Okay, we're good now. It's just like, basically this version of Ryuen is saying I had no plans to drop out at all or something like that. But I don't know, it's just a weird change. And then there was actually my biggest kind of gripe with episode 13, which isn't really a gripe as much as it is a minor complaint. And that's the way they handled the Sato confession to Ayano Koji, where since she likes him so much, she wants to confess to him on Christmas Day under a tree, and hopefully he says yes. And whereas in the original light novel, where I actually felt bad for her when he rejects her, because she literally even has some kind of gift plan to give to him if he accepted, and they actually were doing it under the tree. In this, they're just walking and then they stop and she confesses. And I don't know, it just didn't leave the same impact as the light novel, where they were under this tree that said that confessions are very set to succeed. However, in this case, it didn't succeed, and she was all ready to give him something to celebrate getting together, but because he turned her down, she just shoved the gift away. And it was a really impactful moment, because it just, I felt so emotional while watching that scene, because I knew that Sato was going to be rejected, but at the same time, it just really hit hard. And the anime just didn't do that for me. It was just there. And I also didn't really like how the season ended, where rather than in the middle of the season hinting at stuff that Sakinagi knows, where she's like, I know about the White Room and you, Ayano Koji, which she reveals in volume 5, instead they decide to take that segment and put it at the end of the season, and they're trying to say Ayano Koji is still dark and edgy and doesn't care about people, even though it's established at this point that he does care a bit about Karuizawa, which I don't get why they don't handle that. Or like, I don't get why they say that. Why they say, oh yeah, he's still dark and edgy as he was in season 1. Like before, I want to say that they have actually established some of these things now in season 3. So, as I said before, I'll take what I can get. I don't get that. But then after that, they decide to have a post-credit segment where then Sakinagi comes in and is just like, yeah, I know about the White Room, which I don't get why they saved that till the end of the season. My only guess is because it was trying to set things up for season 3, which is going to probably be rushing through a lot of storylines to get to the epic chess match between those two, which I'm very excited for. I really hope they don't mess that up in the anime adaptation, since, in my opinion, that chess match is one of the most intense storylines in all of Classroom of the Elite. I was on the edge of my seat while I was reading it, and I really hope the way the anime handles it is good enough, but we'll just have to see. It's just, going back to this season, I don't get why they would have to do all this, why they would change Sakinagi's scene just because they want to tease season 3, but it is what it is. It's just a fine season overall, and I actually think it's worse than season 1, since while season 1 did suffer from its own problems, at least the tests themselves were handled in a way where I still really enjoyed them. However, in this case, the way they handled the light novels were just kinda not amazing, not terrible, but it's a lot worse than the first season. But I know I just sound like I'm complaining a lot, but the fact of the matter is I just didn't care for it that much. There's not too many positive things I could really give it, other than there were some good moments here and there. I thought episodes 6 to 10 were all really fun. I really enjoyed them. And the opening theme, one of the few good things about Classroom of the Elite is its opening theme, since every single one is a banger. It's really good. And yeah, I do like the opening themes for this season, last season, and the theme for season 3 as well. They're all bangers. They're all really good. And that's one of the few things I can really say about these seasons, that the opening themes, while visually they're just kind of iffy, the songs themselves are great. And yeah, just this season, not as good as season 1, but had its upsides, though it more often than not had its downsides. There were some moments that were actually quite well handled, but not a lot, and yeah. I guess one more quick thing I'd like to talk about before we end this is, I don't know how many people really cared about this, but I was a bit disappointed with how they handled the Yamauchi being in love with Sakura segment, where in the light novel as well as in the actual anime, surprisingly, which makes me confused why this was kind of cut out, there's this whole segment where Yamauchi is trying to confess to Sakura, and it's a very important segment to kind of wrap up that storyline. In fact, I thought they were going to cover it in this season, because literally the first episode of this season shows Yamauchi looking at Sakura, but then it never goes anywhere. Never brought up again. Will they ever bring it up? I don't know. They haven't brought it up yet. Will they? Who says? Who knows? I don't know. It's just confusing how they just basically forgot about that whole segment. They teased it saying, yeah, we're going to cover this, but then they never do. And that's kind of a disappointing thing, but yeah. It was a bit of a weird segment to kind of look like you're going to cover that whole thing, but then never cover it. And then there's the stuff like how Pseudo in the light novels is clarified that he's in love with Horikita, but then in this it just kind of almost feels out of nowhere. But I don't know, just the romance in Classroom of the Elite hasn't really been handled too well in this anime adaptation, but that might just be me who feels that way. I don't know, but yeah. That's all I have to say, so we're at the conclusion of this video, and what are my final thoughts? Overall, this season left a lot to be desired. It wasn't horrible, like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing ever! But it just wasn't amazing. The way they handled a lot of the scenes in this was disappointing, like how they cut out a lot of Volume 5, since in the volume itself, the actual events that were occurring in the story were actually happening. We were actually getting to see them happen, but in the anime, they just cut them down to their bare minimum. It's just, I felt like Season 2 had too many moments where it just rushed through things way too fast, and I definitely think that Season 2 is it's kind of a downgrade from Season 1, and that's disappointing because I love the light novels so much, and I'm just disappointed to see how they're handling the anime adaptation of one of my all-time favorite light novels. It's disappointing, to say the least, and I really hope that Season 3 can bring things back, but knowing how many volumes they're trying to adapt in just a 13-episode season, I get the feeling it's probably going to wind up in the same situation as Season 2. Too much content, too few episodes, and yeah, just overall, I give Classroom of the Elite second season a 6 out of 10. It was fine in a lot of ways, but I wouldn't rewatch it. If you're a fan of the light novels, I don't know if you'd like it any more than I did. I just thought it was mediocre and it just wasn't that great, but it's not terrible. It's just not that good. But yeah, that's all I have to say, and thank you all for watching. If you're new to the JGC Anime channel, don't forget to subscribe. I was doing Anime Fans to the channel, and I will see you all around. Peace!